I'll show you some pictures of some of that analytic work that we did to try to understand how many kids need services and how short are we on the things that they need, how big is that gap. We also developed what we call business process maps, which I'll show you in a few minutes, to try to understand how families are supposed to access services, and then we showed them to families to say, is this what it actually feels like when you're trying to access those services? And then while I was doing all that, I also have been, for the last year and a half, coordinating a group of representatives from those 6 agencies, and every Friday morning, we come together for our crisis staffing call, meaning we talk about those kids that are stuck in hospitals or at home in need of services. And you know, there were times in this year and a half where people said, well, you're supposed to be analyzing the system, why are you working on individual cases? But I have to say, those agencies have come together in an unprecedented way, in part because we are talking about actual people. They are all in this field, even though it seems hard to deal with these state agencies sometimes. Everyone is in this field because they want to help people. And when you actually give them a case of a kid who needs help, they come up with some pretty creative solutions, and that gave me the opportunity to witness that, document it, and now be able to reflect back, well, here are all the things we've done that are kind of outside the box ways of getting people the help they need. Let's build our new system around that. So I'm just going to breeze through these examples because you can't see anything that's on here, but these are just some of the things we did. So this is a massive eligibility crosswalk that we built to understand all the programs that are available and who's eligible for what. Now, you don't need to read the details of this, but what you do need to know is that in our future system, where we'll have a centralized portal where families will have one place to go to say what they need, this will be running in the background so that they'll immediately be able to see your child might be eligible for these 6 programs, and it's based on this work that we did. This is one of those business process maps, which is basically like a flow chart to say, if your kid needs services in school, how's that supposed to go? And then we sat down with a group of parents, we showed them this flow chart. We said, is this how it went? And they said, not exactly. So we learned a lot about the inconsistencies in implementing the policies. We also talked to people across the country about the services, some of them that we don't have here that we think we could benefit from. So we heard about respite, we heard about in-home behavioral health aides. Some kids need someone sitting by their side in school. What would it be like if we paid for kids to have that one-on-one assistance in a home, and we could potentially avert crises? That's much cheaper than hospitalizing kids. And sometimes the kids that we see where their needs have escalated, if their parents had had more support in the home, we might not be in that severe and acute situation. So we talked to people across the country about best practices. We also worked on understanding the gaps in services, and we did that in a way that was innovative because, generally speaking, the way we estimate the rate, and Dr. Vora read some statistics about how many kids need help. Some of those come from the CDC or other sources, but the numbers that we hear, like let's say it's 21.3% of kids or 40% of kids, we tend to apply them across the map to the population. But we know that the need for mental health services is not evenly distributed because some things make it higher, like economic hardship and exposure to community violence, and those things are not evenly distributed. So what we did is, we did a gap analysis using an adjusted estimate based on some of those other community factors, and that let us come up with a map that's far more strategic and targeted to guide new investments of resources. And I can talk about any of this in more detail, but I know we're probably all hungry and don't want to spend too much time on it. We also, recognizing, remember that picture, that honeycomb picture in the beginning, there are 6 state agencies. They all purchase services separately from the same community providers. That means that nobody's managing capacity as a system. Each of those agencies purchases what they purchase, but when you put it all in the same place, you can really start to make adjustments that make sense for communities. It had never been put in the same place. So we surveyed all the providers. The other thing we heard is that in the context and post-COVID, that there's a staffing shortage, but we didn't know how much. So we surveyed providers. We said, how understaffed are you? How many open beds do you have? Who's in those beds? And then we put it all on a map. And when we showed it to the state agency people who purchase services, across the board, they all said, wow, like we've never seen this in one place before, and if we had it, we would purchase services differently. Okay, the last thing I'll show you that we did before I get to what we're going to do is that one of the first things I did when I started managing that interagency group that's working on cases was to build a rudimentary website, a portal, that people could put information about a kid who was stuck. And legislators use it, and hospital social workers use it, and some of the people in this room have entered cases in this portal. And it was a test. It was like a test case to see if we could, one, overcome the legal. So these agencies don't talk to each other for a few reasons, they say. One, legally they're not allowed to. Two, technologically they can't. This overcame both of those barriers because we negotiated consents that all of the agency lawyers were happy with, and we built a system that was secure so that together, based on a set of 8 questions, we could figure out which agency has services this youth is eligible for. And the other thing this did, in addition to helping us work together, it created a data source. We now have staffed 160 cases like this, and we can see who is it hardest to staff, who takes the longest, which agency maybe has the most barriers, all kinds of things that we can use to help inform our planning. So, and somebody tell me if I'm like running out of time. If anybody's watching this talk. Okay, so we have 5 goals that you'll see in this blueprint. One is to adjust capacity. Another is to streamline processes to make services easier to get. A third is to get upstream of problems, because a lot of the acute crises we see in the emergency room or in the hospital could have been averted if we could shorten that time to getting kids services. The fourth is increasing accountability, so there's more transparency and everyone can see how many beds there are and how long it takes to get services. And the last one is in developing agility so that as a state, we can adapt to the changing needs. If there are higher rates of some problems or geographically we see higher rates of things, that we can move more quickly. So these are the 12 strategies that I recommended in this blueprint. 4 of them are focused on centralizing and streamlining. That includes 2 pieces of technology that we're working on developing. One is a care portal, a centralized place for families to go. The second one is number 4, which is resource referral technology that everybody will be able to have on their smartphone. You can do so many things on your phone, but you can't register for an appointment for services or see what you're eligible for. And then there are a number of other recommendations that are systemic to try to rearrange the levers and incentives so that everything works more smoothly. So the second set of recommendations is around adjusting capacity, and the third set is around prevention and intervening earlier, and that includes implementing in-school screenings for mental health problems, which many school districts in Illinois already do, but we're learning more about what makes that work in places where they do it, and partnering with pediatricians and making sure that everybody who interacts with a young person, namely doctors and teachers, but everybody who interacts with a young person has the ability to recognize and, at least in the near term, address or connect someone with a mental health problem with a needed service. So I'm summarizing these recommendations. I'll show you them in a few different ways. But the point of this slide is to say, so these are our 5 goals here, and those are, and across the top are the 12 strategies. And the point that I have to make almost every day is that there's no one silver bullet. Like, we can't solve the problem by just adjusting the rates or just creating a centralized portal. None of these strategies will work unless we do the other 4 things that affect, but it's a complicated problem. So I use this to kind of illustrate that if you want to improve accessibility, you have to do those 6 things. And each of these strategies was selected because it hits multiple targets. Okay. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. This is just to say that the way I'm envisioning this, all of these trains are leaving the station at the same time, and they're not all going to get to their destination at the same time. So we're not waiting to start on any of these 12 strategies, but some of them are going to take longer. It's going to take longer to expand the workforce and to implement some of the more broad changes, but some of these things we're already working on and we're going to get there soon. I also wanted to just convey how much support there is and has been by this administration and by the legislative branch. So it is a very uncommon position to be in, to have legislators and the executive branch all providing support for a transformation like this. And this started before I got here with legislation and with the formation of the interagency team. This slide is just to show you all of the things that have happened already on our path toward transformation. And I'm just going through all this animation quickly so I can get to the rest. I'm happy to say that last week Senate Bill 724 passed, and Senate Bill 724 contained in it, I'm going to just skip ahead to it, contained in it these 8 things. These 8 things are the first set of things that we need in statute in order to be able to work differently so that we can solve the problem. In addition to Senate Bill 724 passing last week, we also have the governor's proposed budget, which has $23 million in investments just for this transformation work. That is expanding eligibility, building the technology that I mentioned, continuing to pay for me and my team to lead this work, and I'm happy to say that I've now been appointed for the next 2 years to lead the implementation of these recommendations. With me, I have 4 teams, one focused on implementing technology, one on developing programs, one on working in schools and communities, and one on the data and fiscal issues. And if anybody here wants to be a part of these teams and join us in this work, I welcome you. Lisa's on, Dr. Messenger's on one of these teams, and I can say we have a very big umbrella and we need everybody's help. So we are just working methodically on a phased approach to implementing all of the things in this blueprint, which I encourage you to read. And actually, and I'll just wrap up with this, if you want to read it, you can scan the QR code and you can have the whole blueprint on your device, or you're happy to, somebody wants to take this, you're welcome to. So I think with that, I will wrap it up. But I'm here and I'm going to participate in my tables conversation and happy to talk to all of you about the work we're doing. I'm really, really excited to be able to work on solving this problem.